If you're like me and you find yourself playing solo in Diablo, I can't imagine choosing a better build than the Bone Spirit Necromancer. This build boasts incredible survivability, natural gear progression, and is not too difficult to achieve, only requiring one common unique. I believe this build is the best solo build because it can dish out millions often and for no resource cost, but it does struggle in group play because it is a setup knockdown build and it requires resources that only you can get from units. However, you can clear as fast or faster than group settings with the massive crits hit with your Bone Spirit. I want to showcase the build's skill choices, paragon choices, aspect choices, and then explain the setup and knockdown playstyle that is not only incredibly engaging, but also rewards you with millions of damage and critical strikes, allowing us to one-shot everything in the game. So for skill choices, the skills chosen in this build are all sharply tuned to bring the best out of your gear, paragon choices, and maximize your destructive ability. Now, I won't dig into each passive, but I'll instead highlight the bigger components of these choices and why you should make them. We start in the first row choosing Reap all the way up until Acolyte's Reap so that we can guarantee a corpse with our first hit, and this is mandatory. For the core skills, we skip them all, choosing to elect only 3 points into Unliving Energy and 3 points into Hewed Flesh. In our next tier, we're choosing Blood Mist all the way up until Dreadful Blood Mist, and this is our get out of jail free card, ensuring that we can just escape anything bad. There's also Bone Prison, which I put 4 out of 5 points into, and I leveled that to Ghastly Bone Prison. This is so we can apply Vulnerable to our targets, and this is a key function of our setup. The next tier is another quick passive tier, just choosing to put 3 points into Death's Embrace, and that's it. Now this fourth tier is build defining. We start with Corpse Tendrils maxed all the way out until Blighted Corpse Tendrils because we need those blood orbs. We already have vulnerability through Bone Prison, and so those orbs are going to make this build necessary to function. We also have maxed out Bone Spirit into Ghastly Bone Spirit, allowing us additional crit chance, bringing us much closer to our millions. Now we're also maxing out each of the bone passives: Serration, Compound Fracture, Rapid Ossification, and Emulsion, so feel free to max each of those out and just read them on your own time. Now our ultimate tier is interesting, maxing out the obvious Bone Storm to increase our crit chance while it's active. We also max out Standalone and Memento Mori because we're sacrificing our minions for their buffs. And finally, we place our last point into Oshified Essence, the bone-specific passive. This may seem like a random grab bag of different abilities, but this all lends itself to an amazing build. And to really change the tempo, we have to talk paragon points. Disclaimer, I did forget to record this, but you do want to sacrifice all of your minions. Crit chance for warriors, vulnerability with mages, and crit damage from the golem. Now the Paragon board has a lot of choices, so to simplify it for this video, I'll be going over just the board choice and the glyph choice. You can pause at any point to look at specific point choices, but I fluctuate those often just to try things in different directions, and I encourage you to do so as well. For the starter build, we're choosing Exploit, so that we can take advantage of dealing additional vulnerability damage to those in Bone Prison, and for a few seconds after. For the second board, we're choosing Bone Graft, which allows us to increase our damage and max essence when using bone skills. This is accompanied by the glyph Gravekeeper for 2 reasons. Number 1, we're getting additional damage by corpses, and since we don't consume them, we have a ton. And 2, it buffs rare nodes in range, and all the rare nodes affect bone damage, which is massive. The third board I decided to attach on the right, and it is Scent of Death, which gives us damage dealt to us reduction or damage increased to others based on the amount of corpses around us. Imbiber is the glyph that I have set in this tier, and it helps survivability, but it isn't make or break, and honestly I've been adjusting this one myself periodically. The fourth and final board tier is Flesh Eater, which has corpse kindred abilities, but this leads into the glyph choice, which is Blood Drinker, tying into our blood orb requirement for this build, and again, helping our survivability. Finally, we have a bigger topic, which is the aspects that make this build functional. Most of these are preset aspects that your character will have unlocked if you've beaten all the dungeons, but some are a bit unique, and here's what they bring to the table. Our chest piece is the most important piece of this build, so I want to discuss it first because it is the only unique required and it is build defining. The Blood Artisan's Cuirass allows for us to collect blood orbs to send out free bone spirits that do additional damage than a traditional cast. This is a pretty common unique. I've gotten around 5 or 6 myself, and if you can get it to drop at 5 out of 10 orbs needed, you are golden. Our helmet has aspect of Disobedience, allowing us to survive a bit more as we do damage, and that's about it. Our gloves have aspect of Retribution, which stuns distant enemies and again, just gives us more survivability. For pants, this one's up to the user. I did roll a decent temerity that I've been using for survivability, and that's a unique, so that is not required here. But the blood orbs you generate do heal behind full, and it works really well with that piece of gear. Before, I just had an aspect of Shielding Storm, which gives you barrier from Bone Storm, and that works well. Our boots have Eluding aspect, which allows us to get unstoppable when we're CC'd and then injured. This gives us the ability to escape some bad situations, and I think you'll see a trend here with the survivability starting to stack on. Our weapon has a massive aspect that is necessary for the build, and that's the aspect of Grasping Veins. Now this allows our corpse tendrils to increase our critical strike chance and damage to those who are grabbed. This needs to be on a two-handed weapon to scale higher and allow for the maximum crit chance and maximum damage buff. For our necklace, we have the aspect of Serration, which aids our bone-specific passives and gives us some more crit. Now the rings are up for debate. I've played around with a few different aspects, but overall I found the most universally useful to be the aspect of the Umbral for resource generation and the Sacrificial aspect, which increases sacrifice bonus percentage, and they both help a ton. So now we've gone over everything we can to set ourselves up. So how do we play the damn class? This build is a setup knockdown nuke, meaning there's a few steps, but they will maximize your damage and make sure you are hitting hard. I personally like this playstyle because I'm not a fan of the one-button killers. I like to have a few different things going on. Most commonly, I'll just cast Corpse Tendrils and Bone Spirit, hits for a few 100,000, and kills most mobs. But if you're looking to do millions on big elites and bosses, here's what you'll need to do. Step 1. You cast Bone Storm if it's off cooldown, which will give you additional crit chance. Step 2. We're going to use Reap to create a corpse guaranteed. You can actually do this before the Bone Storm, it's just kind of whenever you do it. Typically, you'll have corpses lying around, so it's not a big deal. Then we cast Corpse Tendrils, and this is to group everyone up in one section. Right after casting Corpse Tendrils, we're going to cast Bone Prison, which is going to give everyone in that nook vulnerability and keep them grouped. And then for the finale, we cast Bone Spirit, which nukes anything and everything in sight. After killing your large grouping of enemies, it's encouraged to go through them because we've built a ton of survivability and we need to collect those blood orbs. The more we collect, the more free bone spirits our blood artisan sends out to clean up the rest of the ads. And that's the build. If you're going into Season 1 solo and you don't have a group, I can suggest no better endgame than this. I understand that meta sites point to Bone Spear and Infinimus Necromancer, but those builds are far less effective solo and lend themselves much better to the 2 to 4 stack group setting. This build will carry you far above your level range, and at level 70, I was able to solo complete nightmares of 40 plus because I was able to survive and still one-shot things 20 levels above. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave any questions or suggestions in the comment and like the damn video.